Today's puzzle deals with sensors and beacons. For example, this sensor senses this beacon because it is closest to it according to the Manhattan distance. Here the Manhattan distance is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 plus 1, 2, 3 equals 9. So in a Manhattan distance of 9 from the sensor, there definitely isn't any other beacon. Otherwise, we would have sensed it. Okay, but there could be other sensors, of course. And for part 1, we shall determine for an arbitrary row how many positions are there where there definitely is no beacon. Okay, so our input data is some text where the sensors and the beacons are. Of course, we have to pass that from text to a data structure. Here's the data structure that I had in mind. So one vector for the sensor positions, one vector for the beacon position, and then one number for the Manhattan distance. Right, so a normal reseq, then we destructure into the interesting parts here, map the parseLong function over that, destructure that into 4 numbers. And then the Manhattan distance is simply the distance in both directions, the absolute value of those. Clojure 111 finally has an abs function, no more need for Java interop. And then we add them up. In our case, that was 6 plus 3. Yeah, and then we cook up this result, as you can see here. Right, then how do we make slices in one row? So if we have the result from the sensors beacons Manhattans function, I call it sen bmans for now, and a particular row, how do we figure this stuff out? So we iterate through all these lines, the structure into the sensor positions. The beacon is not interesting, that's why it's an underscore and the Manhattan distance. And then we see how far apart is the row from the sensor Y position. So how many steps do we already go in the Y direction? And then the rest of the steps is the difference from the Manhattan distance. That's what we can still go in the X direction. So the further away we are from the source, the narrower our slices get, right? And the closer we are, the wider they are. Okay, that's why it makes geometric sense to subtract here. And of course, if we leave the realm of the diamond shape, then yeah, we have to throw away the result. We can't include it. Okay, otherwise, we can now compute our slice. So the steps that we can go on the x-axis, we can either go them to the west or we can go them to the east. And then finally, we increment the right position because we want to have it exclusive. That's just simpler for my brain. Okay, now there are lots of diamonds, hence there are lots of slices in a row, and some of them overlap or are completely contained in each other. So I wrote a merge slices function. For example, a single slice can't be merged. 2 slices that don't touch each other can't be merged. 3 slices that touch each other can't be merged. And here are more interesting cases. For example, if one ends at 20 and the next starts at 20, then we can fuse them to a single slice or merge them from 10 to 30. Or if the second slice begins in the middle of the first slice, then we can merge also. Then we have from 10 to 25. Or if one is completely contained in the other, then we can throw away the second one and just keep the first one. Yeah, and here additional examples for part 1 and part 2. So here all the slices are adjacent or overlapping or included, and here we have one hole in the middle, so the position 14 isn't occupied. Okay, so we have a transient result vector here, which starts out empty, and then we sort the slices initially. Then it's much simpler to detect overlap because only neighbors can overlap. And then we destructure into the first slice and the second slice and the rest of the slices. And if there is no second slice, then we have only one slice left. Then we conch that onto the result and turn it into a persistent vector. The next more interesting merge case, if the second slice begins within the first slice, then we have an intersection or a complete overlap. Yeah, and then we make a new slice that starts at the left. That's guaranteed to be the minimum because we sorted, and sorting vectors means sorting by the first element first and then by the second element. So left one is can't be bigger than left 2, but the right ones, we pick the maximum of those. And that covers all cases. So then left 1 or slice 1 and slice 2 are then merged in a sense. Okay, and otherwise we simply take the first slice as it is and process the rest of the slices. Right, and then for part 1, in the row, for example, 10, how many positions cannot contain a beacon? That would be 26 in the example, and that's quite some code. So first we process the input, then we have our sensors, beacons, and Manhattans. Then we make the slices and merge them. And then, maybe let's skip this for now and start here. So what do we want to do? We want to take all our slices and add them up. What exactly do we want to add up? The difference between right and left. That tells us how many cells it spans. But there could be a beacon in that span, or even multiple beacons. So we have to calculate how many positions cannot contain a beacon. And of course, if there are beacons, then we can't count them as cannot contain a beacon. So here I calculate all the X positions of beacons which are in that row. So we take our full data and say into a new hash set, I only want to keep those where the row, in our case 10, is the beacon Y position. And if that is the case, I want to keep the X position. So that gives us all the beacon X positions in the given row. Okay, and then we can simply count how many of them are there. So we filter all the beacon X positions, and we are only interested in those that are between left inclusive and right exclusive. Right, and that gives us then the result. So turns out a bit more complicated than I initially thought. Okay, and then for part 2, that's not a lot of code, thanks to all our preparations. Find the only possible position for the distress beacon. So in the entire two-dimensional grid, there's only one place where an undetected beacon could be, and we're supposed to find it. And that takes much, much longer. Let's see. So we process the input again. We start at the very first line. Then here we prepare our slices again. And then I check, is there a second slice in our slices? So the merging of the slices will in almost all cases make one huge slice without any holes in it. And if there are more than one slice, then there must be a hole in it. And we are exactly interested in that hole, right? That's where the distress beacon must be. So then via destructuring, nested destructuring, we get at the X position, and then there's just a formula that's given by the problem. I was a bit tripped up that here, first I had the X and here I had the Y. Okay, and otherwise we recur, and this is just a sanity check if I have a bug in my code that I don't loop into infinity. Right, and part 1 took about a millisecond on my computer for my input data, and part 2 took between 5 and 6 minutes. And apparently there are smarter solutions, but I think I already invested enough time to solve today's puzzle.